Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tangmen based on novel. So let's start. Layers of protective soul barriers appeared from the building and blocked the stationary soul cannon shells that they had prepared before they launched their assault. At the same time, they kept feeling that they were being intercepted. The Sun Moon Empire's soul masters also made their move. Even though they were without their title Doluor, they still had the Holy Ghost Church's evil soul masters to lead them. The Zhongli brothers that Huo Yuhao had once met before were included among them. There were quite a lot of these evil soul masters, and their abilities were also special. It was very difficult to separate them and the soul masters that had breached the palace. Help me rise. Strengthen. A woman's shouting voice echoed behind Long Aotian. Long Aotian quickly stepped back and squatted down. Following this, a figure stood on his shoulders and streaks of lights were shot out from behind her, illuminating this figure. In the next instant, this figure shot into the sky like a bolt of lightning. A strong silvery white light glowed brightly, and the moon from earlier turned silver. The bright moonlight made it seem as if another moon had appeared in the sky. As the moonlight surged, the surrounding air started to distort before being crushed. A dark vacuum pulled in the air around this silver moon. The figure that rose into the sky stood in front of the silver moon, forming a weird gesture with her hands. On her body, her last blood-red soul ring was slowly rising. The silver moon was slowly stained by the blood-red light from her soul ring, and turned into a blood moon. Instantly, everyone felt a bloody storm coming from the sky. Even those from the same side were astonished when they saw this scene. Streaks of strengthening light continued to land on this figure. The most eye-catching one was a treasure pagoda that drifted in the air. This pagoda had 7 stories, and 5 of them were shining brightly. The 5 streaks of dazzling light that came from these 5 stories had a strengthening effect. Xu Qianran's pupils shrank when he saw this blood moon. 8-ringed soul Doluor. When the blood moon appeared, Juzi immediately rushed in front of him and shielded him. She had a serious look on her face. The suppression that came from the sky was about to tear her body apart. Even though a protective barrier with the defensive strength of a Class 9 soul tool rose around her, Juzi still felt very uneasy for some unknown reason. At this point, a sonorous phoenix call resonated through the sky. A ball of dark red light suddenly rose from a courtyard beside Xu Qianran's study. This dark red light instantly converted into a pitch-black phoenix that was covered in dark red flames. This phoenix charged towards the figure like a bolt of lightning. Corrosion of the blood moon. Bloody light spread, and the weather changed. Even the titled Doluor that were watching this from the sky could feel the changes that were happening on the ground. When that streak of bloody light shot out, the air it pierced seemed to evaporate completely. The dark phoenix that rose seemed to discover something was wrong. It fluttered its wings and quickly rose up high. Fortunately, the bloody light wasn't targeted towards the phoenix, and only brushed past its body. It struck the Class 9 barrier that was protecting Xu Qianran. Suddenly, the golden barrier was stained blood-red. The thick, blood-red color quickly spread, and Juzi felt as if a sea of blood had completely engulfed them. Her own blood seemed to surge, and she quickly unleashed her invincible barrier. Come back, Juzi. An irresistible suction force came from the back. Juzi felt as if her body had become lighter, and she was immediately sucked into someone's embrace. Following this, everything around her changed. Everything turned scarlet gold. Is this the strength of 100,000-year soul skill? Juzi felt as if her mind had blanked out. Theoretically speaking, a Class 9 protective soul barrier could block the attack of a titled Doluor. However, this theory wasn't applicable in front of an extremely strong soul master. The figure in the sky evidently only had an 8-ringed cultivation. However, her attack managed to overcome a Class 9 protective barrier. Am I dead? Juzi thought to herself in a daze. Against such an irresistible force, she felt very insignificant. However, she soon realized that she wasn't dead. That was because there was an arm around her waist. She subconsciously turned her head to look. What she saw was the cold yet confident face of a person. Your Highness, you managed to stand up. That was exactly what had happened. Xu Qianran was the one standing behind Juzi and holding her waist. However, Juzi was horrified to discover that the Imperial study had disappeared. The entire Imperial study had completely disappeared. On the ground was only a bunch of slowly melting blood-red debris. Xu Qianran looked a little dismal. He had been prepared for the invasion today and was confident. To him, the strongest soul masters that his enemies could possibly send were only 8-ringed soul Doluo. They couldn't possibly reach him. However, the sudden release of the corrosion of the blood moon suddenly made him feel soul masters were truly terrifying. There was a bowl-shaped soul tool above Xu Qianran right now. This dark gold bowl-shaped soul tool was only slightly larger than an ordinary rice bowl. It drifted above Xu Qianran's head and pointed down, flashing with starlight. As the bright starlight shone, it felt as if countless stars were revolving around them. The soul tool released a layer of golden light that engulfed Xu Qianran and Zhu Zi. Zhu Zi had seen the scarlet gold light earlier, because the corrosion of the blood moon had already been blocked by this layer of golden light. It was a top-ranked Class 9 defensive soul tool. As the Sun Moon Empire's crown prince, who had once been the target of an assassination, Xu Qianran was extremely meticulous about his own safety. In the sky, the bloody lights withdrew. Zhong Lishuan felt slightly regretful now. Although this sudden attack didn't have to be successful, it would naturally be better if it did. There was one point the Star Luo Empire and Heavenly Soul Empire were correct about. Killing Xu Qianran would cause internal problems within the Sun Moon Empire. This was also what Shrek Academy hoped to see. However, Xu Qianran's soul tool was too strong. Even when she used her corrosion of the blood moon strengthened by her teammates, she didn't manage to kill him. She only had this one opportunity. The Sun Moon Empire's soul masters and evil soul masters were already shooting soul rays towards her. The dark phoenix in the sky was already crying as it charged towards her. Zhong Lishuan drifted back and fused with the silver moon behind her, forming a blurry silvery glow that covered her body. She didn't immediately tackle the dark phoenix that flew towards her. Her silver moon sank and landed on the ground again. If she remained in the sky, she would be too obvious. Even with Zhong Lishuan's abilities, she wouldn't be able to handle the barrage of attacks that would surely come at her if she continued to make herself such an obvious target. However, the dark phoenix didn't give up pursuing her. It chased her all the way down. Long Aotian turned into a huge hammer and went straight for the dark phoenix. Zhong Lishuan was offered some time to retreat. A strange noise sounded, and Long Aotian's body burned with dark red flames. He flew back into his own crowd of people, causing exclamations to ring out. He had actually lost in a direct confrontation. "It's indeed you, Xiao Dao. Wake up!" Zhong Lishuan shouted. As she drifted forward, she took up Long Aotian's core offensive position. Right now, her body was surrounded by the moonlight of the silver moon. She had completely fused with the silver moon to form her silver moon true body. It was a powerful martial soul true body that was adept at both close-range and long-range attacks. As she lifted her right arm, a thick beam of moonlight blocked the dark phoenix. Zhong Lishuan felt a gust of warm air coming towards her. The moonlight that she shot out was distorted by this warm air. When it reached her opponent, it had been greatly weakened. This was ultimate fire. No, it's an impure ultimate fire. Zhong Lishuan immediately made her judgment and turned more serious. The dark phoenix didn't make any sound, and quickly flashed before it clashed with Zhong Lishuan. At this instant, moonlight and flames filled the palace. Zhong Lishuan was engaging the dark phoenix in an intense fight. At this point, the fight in the sky had also experienced changes. "Guys, what are you still waiting for? Attack! I want to see how this bunch of fellows is going to stop me without Long Xiaoyao." Dubuzi started to turn stubborn, and immediately gave an order. Elder Xian was stunned, but he naturally couldn't let Dubuzi know about the changes on his side. He had no choice but to give the signal to attack as well. "Let's fight and see first. Perhaps we'll gain the upper hand." Long Xiaoyao didn't seem to be bothered at all. As he rolled in the sky, a huge patch of black air turned into countless dark meteors that shot towards Elder Xian and Dubuzi. At Long Xiaoyao's level, his abilities were so strong that he could affect meteorological phenomena. Elder Xian and Dubuzi had no choice but to deal with him. There was an intense confrontation between both sides. Ever since they appeared, Shrek Academy had possessed the upper hand. The body sect was very strong, and their style was very similar to Dubuz's. They attacked ferociously the moment they appeared. There were not many evil soul masters who could edge them out in direct confrontations. They were mainly strong in terms of their depravity and special abilities. At this point, they were being suppressed. As for the Sun Moon Empire's titled Doluor, they were at a distinct disadvantage as they faced Shrek Academy's titled Doluor. Shu Tianran had been observing the situation in the sky. Seeing that his side was being thrown into a more and more unfavorable situation, he started to turn pale. Hall Master, please prepare. Yes. His room had been destroyed, and almost all his guards had been killed. However, this was still the Radiant City's Imperial Palace. Shu Tianran didn't have a lack of men. On the other side, Zhong Lishuan and the rest suddenly heard weird noises. Zaza, zaza, gaga, gaga. These weird noises didn't come from one direction. They came from all directions. This was... Zhong Lishuan turned slightly anxious. She unleashed her moonlight with all her strength to force the Dark Phoenix back. However, waves of fire surged from the Dark Phoenix's body and swept towards her. The Dark Phoenix seemed completely fearless. Zhong Lishuan and the rest very soon developed an ominous feeling. It was because they were horrified to realize that the Imperial Palace was transforming. The surrounding rooms covered with protective barriers started to move. They started to crack open, and cannon barrels poked out from these rooms. Under the light emanated by the protective barriers, the cold metal glow emitted by these cannons was filled with a destructive aura. If Huo Yuhao were here and had time to think, he would have guessed that the warehouse he had discovered wasn't the only one. It was because there weren't any Class 7 soul tools and stationary soul cannons, or anything stronger, over there. The other more valuable and terrifying warehouse was located in the Imperial Palace. Everything in here was what was lacking in the other warehouse. There were all sorts of soul tools and weapons that were at least Class 7. Zhong Lishuan's expression changed when she saw the cannon barrels appearing, and sensed the terrifying soul power that was surging around them. She shouted without hesitation, "Retreat! Retreat from the ground!" At this moment, those who were fighting the enemies on the ground were the safest. That was because the soul cannons were all aimed towards the sky. After all, a ground attack would affect the palace, and even the city. This problem could be circumvented if the cannons were aimed towards the sky. Those who were in the sky were the most threatened at this moment, and they could feel it. When one became a titled Doluor, he would feel some form of sensation if he was in danger. Right now, they could all sense a fatal threat. It was an extremely terrifying feeling. When they looked down, even Elder Xian and Dubuzi couldn't help but be shocked. The Imperial Palace seemed to have turned into a metal forest. Thick cannon barrels were sticking out from the buildings. Glaring lights were already starting to shine inside them. Evidently, the cannons were charging. Even the smallest of these cannons had barrels more than 30 centimeters in diameter. The largest cannon that Elder Xian could see had a barrel that was more than 2 meters in diameter. Even though he wasn't familiar with soul tools, he could tell that it had to be at least a Class 8 soul tool. There was no lack of stationary soul tools, either. Huo Yuhao was right. Assaulting the Imperial Palace was a mistake. The Sun Moon Empire was the strongest empire, and had built its name on soul tools. How could their base not be prepared? A cold look flashed across Dubuz's eyes. He was about to dive down. However, Long Xiaoyao suddenly showed a tremendous change. He was originally in his black dragon form, but that suddenly turned illusory. However, this illusory figure suddenly expanded in size. In the blink of an eye, the black dragon that Long Xiaoyao had changed into grew more than 1,000 meters in length. As it revolved in the sky, Dubuzi, Elder Xian, and many of the titled Doluor on their side were stopped. They were prevented from charging down to launch an attack. At this point, Elder Xian knew exactly what to do. He immediately shouted, "Retreat!" When the others from Shrek Academy heard his signal, they immediately detached from their groups and quickly retreated. Once they retreated, Dubuzi had no choice but to retreat as well. However, he couldn't help but curse as he withdrew unwillingly. The titled Doluor formed streaks of flowing light. They disappeared into the horizon like shooting stars. The mysterious founder of the Holy Ghost Church lifted his hand to stop his disciples from chasing them. As he looked at all the cannons below, he too felt very uncomfortable. After all, the strength of the Sun Moon Empire wasn't something a mere sect like theirs could compare to. Xu Qianran stood there quietly. Seeing that everything was going according to plan, he couldn't help but reveal a grin on his face. At this point, Juzi realized that Xu Qianran could stand up not because his legs were fine. He had put on a pair of exquisitely crafted prosthetic legs hidden from view under his pants. Class 9 Soul Tool. The Crown Prince is able to use a Class 9 Soul Tool. Juzi was astonished. She thought she had understood him very well, but didn't know that his abilities had reached such a level. What did it mean if he could use a Class 9 Soul Tool? Even if this Class 9 Soul Tool had a lower requirement, its defensive strength was still at the standard of a top-ranked Class 9 Soul Tool. This meant that Xu Qianran was at least a top-ranked, 8-ringed Soul Doluor. However, he was only slightly above 30 years of age. His abilities would be considered rare even if he were in Shrek Academy. Xu Qianran was slightly moved as he loosened his grip on her waist. He said, "Good, good. You are just like you were many years ago." Juzi lifted her head to look at him. She was actually moved, and couldn't help but sigh. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. Even if I'd never met Huo Yuhao, I still wouldn't fall for you. I can only think of you as my benefactor." Xu Qianran didn't know what Juzi was thinking. As he looked at her delicate skin, a regretful look flashed across his eyes. "It's a pity that I can't, otherwise, Juzi would indeed be a perfect partner. Follow the plan. Push them to the west side. All Soul engineering teams in the other 3 directions, be on your highest alert. We must not let them escape from any of those 3 directions." "Yes." Juzi hurriedly acknowledged his words before she turned and rushed off. At this point, a streak of flowing light shone in the sky. This streak of light was very special. After it rose into the sky, it turned into a glittering green freak-like entity. It remained in the sky for a long time without disappearing. Everyone from Shrek Academy immediately saw this streak of light as they were retreating. Elder Xian was delighted. He punched his left arm with his right fist and shouted, "Good." Just as he was surprised, another streak of red light rose into the sky. It formed the same entity as the earlier streak of light. Elder Xian's expression changed and he said, "Go. Leave immediately to the west." Dubuzi was flying not far away from Elder Xian. When he saw everyone from Shrek Academy changing their direction towards the west, he couldn't help but shout, "Little Xian, what are you doing? Do you really think they didn't set a trap in that direction?" Elder Xian was stunned. It seemed the body sect was also prepared. However, they had their own plan. While there might be traps in the west, they couldn't possibly breach the defenses in the other 3 directions. He still had to ensure the safety of Shrek's team and the Tang sect. These 2 teams could only leave after they finished competing on the final the next day. They couldn't break out while it was dark now. Otherwise, breaking out with the body sect might be a good choice. "Old freak, we have our own plan. We'll meet again. Let me give you a warning, leave the city immediately. Don't continue to remain here." After he finished speaking, Elder Xian gathered everyone to meet Zhonglishuan and the rest, who had just broken their way out. After that, they proceeded towards the west. Dubuzi was a bit stunned. However, he wisely chose to believe Elder Xian at this point. He also gestured to his people and those from the Star Luo Empire to escape in another direction. They were very thorough in this mission. They quickly rushed towards the streets, and followed predetermined routes to meet up with Shu Jojo and Wei Na. "Great-grandfather, did we succeed?" Wei Na asked anxiously. Dubuzi was a little annoyed as he replied, "No. Their defenses were too strong. Long Xiaoyao was indeed shamelessly there. Let's leave, quickly." I saw some kind of signal from Shrek Academy earlier. Little Xian warned me to quickly leave the city. They must have had arranged something. Let's leave immediately. Shu Jojo asked, Elder Du, aren't those from Shrek Academy leaving with us? Dubuzi snorted and answered, Little Xian is very concerned about glory. He won't leave before the tournament is over. Shrek Academy likes to brag about how open and aboveboard they are. They won't leave now. Let's go. Anyway, we can't store too many people in that thing of ours. I'm sure Shrek won't suffer much, given their abilities. Come to think of it, I'm quite excited to find out what kind of surprises Little Xian will bring me. Quickly, instruct your people to move off now. All right. Shu Jojo didn't delay either, and quickly gave the order. On the other side, Elder Xian quickly left with the rest from Shrek Academy. Zhong Lishuan managed to catch up to him. Elder Xian, are we going back first? We still have the tournament tomorrow. Elder Xian didn't hesitate, as he heard Zhong Lishuan's words. No. Did you not see his signal? Green means he was successful, and red means danger. You guys should hide outside the city for a little while, and go back when dawn breaks. We will hide somewhere in the western suburbs, and prepare to reinforce Huo Yuhao. If something happens to him at the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament, it will be convenient for us to escort him away. Huo Yuhao was still participating in the competition in the western suburbs, and this was one of the most important reasons why Elder Xian didn't want to leave with Dubuzi and the others. Huo Yuhao was Shrek's future. Zhong Lishuan was a little worried and anxious. What about Bei Bei? He's still at the hotel. Should I look for him? Elder Xian heaved a faint sigh and said, You're not thinking straight, because you're too concerned, Lishuan. Do you really think, with Huo Yuhao's meticulousness, that he didn't think about Bei Bei? The signal that he just sent out means danger, but they have just left from there. Furthermore, he has to continue in the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament, so he will only reappear after the competition ends, no matter what happens in the city. There's more than enough time for him to send someone to fetch Bei Bei between now and then. Zhong Lishuan bit down on her lower lip. It was true, she wasn't thinking straight, because she was too concerned. Even though that fellow. She stared at Elder Xian with a pair of bright and spirited eyes. Elder Xian, I'm still not assured. Elder Xian felt a little helpless. All right, you can go, but be careful. I'm afraid the city might be under martial law very soon, and you should take Bei Bei out of the city as soon as possible once you meet him. Rendezvous with us at the western suburbs. Yes. Zhong Lishuan's voice had barely dropped before she flew out and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Elder Xian wasn't that worried about her safety, as Zhong Lishuan was strong enough to challenge even a titled Doluo. Furthermore, she was one of the people leading a finalist team in the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. It would be easier for her to deal with things if she wasn't masked when she entered the city. In the western suburbs, Yi Yulin's tightly knitted eyebrows finally relaxed. The colors in the skies above Radiant City changed continuously. Normal people couldn't understand what was happening, but a powerful individual like him could. This especially true, because he was the Star Sky Doluo, so he was naturally more sensitive about everything that happened in the skies. The other side had finally settled down, and it seemed like the Empire was in control of the situation. Yi Yulin supported Xu Tianran. Furthermore, he was one of the main committee members when the Royal Palace was being designed, so he was very well versed in the Royal Palace's defensive capabilities. He had absolute faith that even if an ultimate Doluo arrived above the Radiant City's Royal Palace, he or she wouldn't have a good time against the Royal Palace's defense mechanisms all going off at the same time. The Royal Palace's main defense mechanisms hadn't even been activated yet, which meant that the intruders were not worth activating their fortifications. Even though the intruders were in the sky, the Royal Palace would still create an enormous disturbance if they fired countless Class 8 and Class 9 soul cannons heavenwards, possibly instilling panic into the citizens. But everything had settled down by now, which meant the issue had been resolved. The furor in the city had settled down, but the tournament was starting to pique Yi Yulin's excitement. More than half of the round's stipulated time had passed at this point. The fellow named Tang Wu hadn't begun on a single formation array, and his movements even seemed to slow, as if he were a little fatigued. He was still working on some miscellaneous components. Yi Yulin observed him for a little while. Those components gave him a refreshing feeling, the springs, the mechanical joints, and everything else gave him quite some inspiration. This youth was clearly very familiar with these things from the way he worked. The only problem was, no matter how intricate and exquisite these things were, soul tools needed formation arrays to work. Yi Yulin was a Class 9 soul engineer, and he could naturally understand some of Huo Yuhao's intentions after observing him for so long. This youth wanted to use certain unique mechanical joints and components to substitute for certain formation arrays. Yes, that must be it. But even so, human-shaped soul tools require far too many formation arrays. More than half of the given time has passed. So can he finish his soul tool if he hasn't started on them yet? Yi Yulin liked this youth's speed, stability, and technique. This was especially true because this youth was crippled, his body was weak, but his will was strong, and this made Yi Yulin even more moved about taking him in as his disciple. Even though he didn't know where Huo Yuhao had learned his skills, Yi Yulin was a giant among men in the soul engineer world. He wasn't afraid that Huo Yuhao would be unwilling to be his disciple. But he was starting to worry for this young man as time continued to pass. Can it be that this youth will be eliminated from this round, even though he possesses such impressive standards, because he can't complete his soul tool? Yi Yulin began to feel a little regretful after he understood what Huo Yuhao was trying to do, because he hadn't been watching Huo Yuhao too closely from the beginning. Therefore, he could only partially understand the delicate mechanical parts that Huo Yuhao was working on. Huo Yuhao was also very sly. He was crafting all kinds of miscellaneous components, and these components were placed randomly all around him. Only somebody with his level of spiritual power wouldn't feel confused, or find everything chaotic. Huo Yuhao would do all the stitching, splicing, and assembly of the various mechanical parts at the end of everything. He's really making me worry. When exactly is he going to start creating formation arrays? He's making a few too many mechanical parts, is he not? He has more than 200 components. Is he really going to be able to stitch everything into a human-shaped soul tool? I'm glad that I decided to come here today. I hope this youth can show me a miracle. Yi Yulin stood up so that he could observe Huo Yuhao's crafting process a little better. Yi Yulin wasn't the only one watching him. Of the 7 judges, there were 3 of them who were observing this crippled youth, who had metal parts lying around his crafting desk and on the ground around him. The Holy Ghost sect's vice-founder was sitting quietly inside the resting area beneath the competition stage. She seemed like she had no idea what was happening within Radiant City, and her expression didn't change at all. She only grunted softly when news of what had happened reached her. Her grunt was full of disdain. A faint smile appeared on Nangong Wan's face. Seems like some people have tucked tail and ran. If they choose the western side, then so be it. This tournament was extremely important to them, but it wasn't important enough that the vice-founder and the 4 elders had to hold down the fort. Their presence was to continue giving the Soul Masters, who were trying to break out an impression that the Western Front was still defended, except it was a little weaker than the other sides. The Holy Ghost Church's basic responsibility would be complete if the Soul Masters attempted to break through the western side. Huo Yuhao's forehead was starting to sweat. His spiritual avatar had been separated from his body for far too long, and the side effects of this separation were finally starting to show. Spiritual power that was separated from the spirit was bound to be intimately connected to his original body. This connection would become weaker with the passage of time, and once this connection was completely severed, the separated part would never return to his body and simply dissipate. The Skydream Iceworm had mentioned that this wasn't enough to threaten Huo Yuhao's life, but he would definitely be severely hurt if such a situation did happen. It would also mean he wouldn't be able to compete anymore. But some things couldn't be hurried. There were many things that could only be done after making sufficient and necessary preparations. Quick, quick, quick. Huo Yuhao was almost done with his mechanical components, and he was preparing the rare metals that he would need for his formation arrays. However, he couldn't start engraving and sculpting his formation arrays in his mentally weak state. All he could do was wait. The tournament was still ongoing, and he would definitely raise suspicion if he stopped doing anything. The Holy Ghost Church's vice-founder and the 4 elders were watching everything on stage from beneath it, and they were all evil soul masters and titled Doluo. Nobody could predict what their reaction would be once they realized that something was wrong with him, and his only choice if his second senior brother and he were attacked was to hide inside the Spectre demiplane. But if that happened, Huo Yuhao's spiritual avatar would be unable to return to his body, and he would be seriously injured. How then could he arrange and work out the things that were to happen afterwards? Quicker. He had already prepared the best materials that he would need for his formation arrays. There were 18 different rare metals of all sorts of colors arranged in front of him, while the mechanical components that he had completed before this were strewn all over the ground. Yes, Huo Yuhao and Xian Zuan had made a breakthrough in their research. They had managed to simplify the Tang sect's mechanical hidden weapons principles, and the simplest human-shaped soul tool they could create only needed 18 formation arrays. Huo Yuhao's hands didn't dare to stop, and he could only use his carving knife to start sculpting these rare metals into their rough shapes and sizes. The detailed stuff would have to wait. 18 pieces of rare metal were quickly sculpted. I can't stop right now. Huo Yuhao had insisted on this idea, because he couldn't let anyone see through anything he was doing, and he couldn't reveal any loopholes or weaknesses. Otherwise, problems would irrevocably arise even when his spiritual avatar returned to his body. Those evil soul masters were adept in dealing with all kinds of spirits. What else could Huo Yuhao do without crafting his formation arrays? He could only start assembling his human-shaped soul tool. Huo Yuhao pointed his palms toward the ground, and 7 to 8 components flew in front of him. He quickly pieced them together and assembled a small and agile joint in no time, before he sucked up several other components and continued assembling everything. The assembly process was a lot simpler than crafting those mechanical pieces. There were just so many pieces that other people felt a little dazed looking at them. However, Huo Yuhao didn't even need his eyes to see, and he used his capturing crane controlling dragon technique to suck those components to him and piece them together continuously. He would place each relatively larger mechanical piece neatly on the crafting desk before moving on, and it didn't take long for him to assemble 100 larger parts. This video will end here.